we got like this kind of this nice little box thing here, right? Which, whatever, it's cool. We got a little bit of tension pulling here. Okay, but what if there was an alternative way of doing some of this stuff? And I'm using Max are a little borked right now, so you start seeing me jump around, it's because of 3D Studio. But we could also do a Boolean on these. Now I know some of you guys are like, he's going to use a Boolean, this is insane. Nobody uses Booleans. That's not true at all. A lot of people use Booleans. They're very effective. They're hyper effective. Booleans get a bad name because some of the geometry they create is not desirable. For non-deforming, non-vertex deforming objects, meaning hard surface models, it actually is a great thing. In fact, that's kind of what they were designed for. So I'm going to come under compound objects. I always tend to use pro Boolean. Start picking. It's going to minus that. Okay, I want you to come under here. This is a max operation, by the way. We're going to come under advanced operations and say remove only invisible edge. This is a very important thing, okay? Because what's going to happen is the more this thing gets complicated, the more edges and stuff, it's going to start to pull away edges that we don't want. So now, what we can do is I'm going to convert you to an editable poly. And I'm going to take these edges here, and I'm just going to clean this up, because I want to have some nice bevels on our edges here. Double click on the edges there to get that. Pull this down. Okay. And you know what, let's just make this more complicated than what the other one was, just so you can actually kind of see one of the benefits of using Booleans for this stuff. We'll do you. We don't need all of those edges in there. We still want to be thoughtful and clean. And I'm going to go like this. And then I'm going to do this. This is something that you probably would never do in a video game, but this is a great point to illustrate the power of these, of what a Boolean can actually do. Take you, and collapse selected. We're going to weld this guy together. Or not weld him, but scale him down a little bit. Flip him. What axis is that? It's right there. I'm going to flip you 180 degrees. So he's actually inside of... Let's go to the wireframe here. He's actually inside there. Right there. Grab this guy again. Come back over into Pro Boolean land, which is again under compound objects. Pro Boolean. Start picking. Bam. Okay, shaded. Okay, actually I didn't even have this thing centered up, and you can see what it did. It actually cut into the lower portion of this object. Okay, which is okay. Like, that's not bad. Sometimes you want that. Sometimes you... oh, that was a good demo for the remove invisible edge, by the way. So you see how all these edges are gone? Remove all the invisible edge is only going to mess with the stuff that's affected here. And for whatever reason, if you wanted to, this thing is now has like all these interior faces that was done from our original our original cutter object, which is right here. Okay, this will not subdivide. Okay, and we can kind of fake it a little bit, and I'll show you how to fake it. These edges right now, like you can get some very weird stuff because sometimes it's not going to know how to tessellate or retriangulate this mesh. If you were to export this out as an OBJ or FBX, which are all file formats, we'll talk about those a bit later. You know, just understand if you do use Booleans, you kind of want to help clean it up a little bit. And I'll show you what happens when I turbo smooth this. Get ready for this thing to explode and be angry. That is just, I don't even know what that is, but it's not pretty. Even if we tell this thing to use the correct smoothing groups, it's not going to. It's not happy with really anything. So let's try and define really quick and auto smooth that stuff. Yeah, so this is the negatives of using Pro Boolean, right? You can't really do that. You have to rely back onto the surface normals that we talked about earlier, okay? Which, again, we can do that. We're armed. We know how to do that now. We can go in and say, hey, this whole loop here, we're going to grow this selection, and I'm just going to tell this thing to auto smooth, And now we have some nice edge work there. It looks defined, it's clean. And we were able to cut this shape in pretty fast. If you were to do this in a traditional subdivision way, it'll take you forever. Okay, so when you're modeling this stuff, you really want to be thinking about the techniques and how you're creating this content. Okay, so we're going to leverage kind of everything. We're going to leverage basic polygonal modeling, Booleans. We're going to do spline modeling. We're going to do all sorts of stuff to try and get our content to look as nice and as good as it can and in a reasonable time frame. One of the things that I want you guys to try to avoid, as much as it may happen for some of you, is to be overly anal on the topology of your meshes. It's a good thing to be worried about how your object, how the wireframes and stuff of your object look, especially if you're animating stuff. But for most environment artists, in most environment props, I'm going to say 98% of the time, you can have n-gons, you can have triangles. You're not going to hurt anything. The tools, a lot of the rules that people talk about are rules from 10 to 12 years ago when GPUs and processors were very different. Most of this stuff, when it goes out into a game engine, it's going to get triangulated and it's going to be spit out. If it looks good in the engine and it's not hurting any of performance and you're not breaking stuff, it's okay. Alright, I'll say it again. If it's not hurting stuff in the engine, if it's not hurting the experience, if it's not hurting the frame rate, if it's not breaking stuff, if you can unwrap it and you can get it in and get it done quickly and meet your art direction or meet your team's goals, then do it however the heck you can do it. Don't get too hung up on the way it should be. Because the more I've done this, the longer I've been doing this, the more people talk about rules and the way you should generate content and stuff, it changes. It really does. It changes all the time, and it really comes down to how quickly you can adapt and really what the end goal is. So if your goal is to have a perfectly quadded mesh, then that's great. If your goal is to meet your deadline, that's something that's a little different as well.